Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining me today would typically be Michael Becker, but he is tied up today working on another transaction for his group. So we'll look to have Michael back in the podcast, I think, next week. So as Michael Becker and I say, the first transaction is the hardest. Last week we spoke to Gary and Heidi Young in their first apartment acquisition. As you probably remember, Gary is a physician, and they purchased an 11-unit apartment building. It was a baby step. It was a needle mover in their life, and it was a change in their mindset. They had a few single-family rental properties, but they never thought about apartment investing. Now they're looking to purchase a 100-unit apartment building. They purchased the property by themselves and had one family member invest with them, and they did not syndicate the deal, so they didn't have other investors go into transactions with them, just one family member. So baby steps can become real movers in an investor's life. So you can gain larger ground with apartment investing. The biggest advantage is that multifamily is scalable, more rooftops, less fragmented management, and sometimes easier to finance. Again, the first one is the most difficult one. In the podcast today, we have another doctor. Doug is a dentist in the Dallas area. Jennifer, his wife, works on their investments, and they purchased one property, and they're working hard to find transaction number 2. But I wanted to focus on transaction number 1 and tell you some of the challenges that they had as a first-time apartment owner. And I thought we would kind of go in a little bit more detail and visit with them. So I want to welcome to the podcast Doug and Jennifer Jopling. Hello, guys. How are you?
We're fine, Paul. Thanks for having us.
Hello, Paul.
So let's get everybody to meet you, kind of understand a little bit about what your background is and where you guys came from. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, and Doug, I'll let you jump in.
Okay, Paul, I'm a native Texan. Actually, my relatives settled the area back in the 1850s.
Wow.
Grew up in Dallas, moved to Richardson in the 70s, went to Texas A&M where I met Jennifer. And
is that a gig'em? Is that what I heard?
Yes, gig'em.
That's a whoop. Yeah. So really know the area well, know Fort Worth well because both my parents were raised in Fort Worth, and that did lead us to the property that we currently own in Fort Worth because that was in the area that my parents and my grandparents spent a lot of time.
No kidding. So we'll talk about that in a second. Jennifer, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I grew up in Clear Lake City. My dad worked for NASA, so I'm a Texan, but I got here as fast as I could, kind of Texan. Went to A&M, met Doug, worked for JCPenney Financial for 8 years, then just helped raise the kids, helped Doug's practice, worked on PTA, committees, all that.
So fantastic. So now you're a dentist right now, Doug.
I'm a dentist in Plano, currently practice 3 days a week as we've been growing our real estate business. Allows me to spend more time working on deals with Jennifer.
That's great. That's great. So tell us a little bit about, why did you guys get into real estate? Was it something did you start off with single family, or what did you do before you got into multifamily?
Well, we started toying with single family, and then we had one single family under our belt, and then we had a life-changing event. Doug was in a really serious car accident in 2014. That just kind of changed our perspective on how we looked at where income was going to come from, what our retirement was going to look like, just the family dynamics too. There was a lot of unknowns at that time.
Yeah, we actually had 2 single families at the time because our daughter at Texas A&M had a property that she was in, and I think she had 2 roommates. So that's one that Jennifer had found back when Maddie started college at Texas A&M, and that turned out to be a really good investment.
Now, had you guys own a single family rental before you guys bought something down?
We got both of these about the same time, and they worked out really well. We did sell the one in College Station this past year because she's no longer in school, and our youngest daughter wasn't wanting to live in that home. So,
how long of a drive is it from your house to Texas A&M?
It's about 2.5 hours, 3 hours, maybe.
And how did you manage the property at a distance?
We had a third-party management company.
They did a pretty good job?
Yes, they did.
But your daughter was down there too, so she was
Right, so she could keep an eye on it, and she would call the property management company if something was going on. But yeah, for the most part, they took care of everything.
The roommates paid their rent on time?
Oh, yeah. It was no problem. That worked out really well.
So you had a life-changing event in 2014, and that kind of opened up your eyes a little bit to income, cash flow, how, if something were to happen more serious than it did, how you guys were going to continue to survive. And so you were thinking, well, perhaps we need to focus something that gives us a cash flow on a monthly basis. Before you got into single family or even multifamily, did you think about anything else that could have done the same thing? Was there any other investment products that you guys looked at that was?
We did. We looked for things that had private equity because the mutual fund market and stocks and bonds really wasn't working for us. We had hired a financial planner that we'd used for 11 years, and he was not getting a very good return, but he still got paid to invest our money. So we started going to a mentoring group in the Dallas area. Listened to them for years on the radio. We tried to devour anything we could about real estate investing, went to several seminars and never really took the big step other than the first 2 single families that we had. And again, I remember laying in the hospital for a month, wondering why didn't we buy more single families? Well, we did make a commitment to learn even more once I got better and could kind of get out of the hospital and out of the house. So we did join this group. We learned a lot. We were both committed, and I thank Jennifer for that because we are a team in this. It's not like I think we should do this, and she says, okay, go ahead and do that. It's like she's fully invested in it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's all in.
Yeah.
I mean,
all in? You want to know all in? We cashed out all our IRAs. We refinanced our house. Yeah. We were pulling money out of everything to invest.
We already had a lot, that had been saved because our parents, both her parents and my parents, taught us to be careful with money and not spend more than we earn and put some away for later. But there's more to life than just saving money. You have to invest it well. And we didn't really feel like we had done that. We did what we were told, which seems to be the way to go for most people, but we learned that there are better ways to do it, which we can offer proof of that because we recently cashed in on some deals that were extreme equity gains. We've got more money now to invest in more deals that we're going to be leads on.
That's great. So, I'm a big believer in investing in education before investing in real estate. So you guys worked with this mentoring education group. Did they teach you a lot of from the alpha to the omega of multifamily? Did you find a lot of value in what they brought to the table?
I would say so. What would you say, Jennifer?
Yeah, I would say so. But I also think it's the relationships we built. Like with you, Paul, we've learned so much from you. Our attorney, we've learned a lot from that whole group.
Sure.
So the management people that we use, the other lead investors that are doing the same thing that have been doing it since before we joined, we've learned a lot from them. Everybody seems to share the best practices. And, we're not starting from ground zero. We're already able to start into a project with a lot of knowledge that we didn't have to learn the hard way.
And being part of that education mentoring group has a network that comes with it too. Yes. And so you probably met a lot of fine people that were serious about real estate investing with you. Now, did you guys go into the first transaction you did as a lead or the kind of the managing member, the person that put the deal together? Or did you guys go in as a passive investor to kind of put your big toe in the water, kind of figure out this is what I want to do, but I don't want to lead the deal. I just want to kind of see what it's all about and see how that managing member treats us and how we can educate ourselves on what the best practices that they do or what they don't do that we want to change if we were to become our own deal. Tell us a little bit, were you a passive investor?
The very first deal we got into a few months after we joined this education group, we knew the lead putting the deal together. We liked what he was doing. So we just went in as a passive, just with the minimum amount that we were going to invest with that group. And then we got in with another group with 3 properties. And the first one, we were key principals on that deal.
And what does that mean, Doug, being key principal?
Well, I mean, we'd expressed that we could fulfill that role with some of the investors. And when the time came, this group needed another key principal because someone who had served in that role had to bow out. And they knew that we had the net worth that could help them to secure the financing on that property. So they asked if we could help, and we said, sure, we'd love to. And, it's worked out really nice. That property, actually, that one just sold.
Yeah.
So we were in that one for almost 2.5 years, maybe 2 years and 3 months, with a really nice return on that. We learned a lot about value type properties, how to take one that from a management standpoint, from a physical standpoint, need a lot of work. That's what this group did. We've learned a lot from them. We feel like we can now translate that into a deal of our own, maybe not as big. I think that one was 444 units. We're looking for 100 to 200 units on our next deal, but that type of property that needs those kind of improvements.
Yeah, that's what I like about that educational group, is that it brings a lot of smart people together. And just like you were talking about being a KP, before you were just, as my airplane analogy goes, you were in the back of the airplane, and they had a role for you to move up to the cockpit, not the pilot, but the first officer or co-pilot. So they wanted you to be part of kind of the management group, not the total management group, but they also wanted you to sign on behalf of the entire partnership and the entire airplane or so. So the key principal has to be part of the transaction too, to get the loan, because I think in that deal you got a non-recourse loan, and so that gave you kind of a check of the box that you had some Fannie Mae experience at that period of time. Is that right?
Yeah, and we can't thank you enough for that white paper that you and Old Capital put together, because that gave us a roadmap to follow. Jennifer and I, we realized that we didn't want to just be in single family. We wanted to go multifamily and eventually have the possibility to be lead investors or sponsors of deals. So we were told by you and by other people, mentors, that you do need these boxes checked. So we followed every step of that you've kind of laid out for us. And I encourage anybody listening to the podcast to get that white paper that you put together.
Thank you, Doug. Very kind. So let's talk about this transition to your first multifamily deal. From the period of time that you guys were passive investors to the period of time that you became leads of your own property. So now you've moved over from the first officer seat now to the captain's seat of the airplane. What was your time frame? How long were you on the sidelines?
Well, let's see. First passive deal was, I guess we put our money into that in July of 14. Then we became KPs in January of 15. Then again, I think in May of 15 on the second deal as KPs. And then there was another one pretty quickly after that. I think it was in July. So from that point, that's July 15. And then we closed on the property in Fort Worth as leads in January of 17. It was supposed to close, I think, in December, but we had a few things that came up that we had to deal with.
Well, let's talk about that.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about the property that you guys are the managing members of. How did you find that property, Jennifer?
Well, we started looking. We had to kiss a couple of frogs along the way. We actually found a property that in Dallas first that you went and looked at. A group out of California with 1031 money came in and swooped that one up.
Ouch.
And then we looked at another one in the Fort Worth area, and it was more of a value play than the one we have. You also came and looked at that one, and it was like the 6 different floorings in that. Do you remember that apartment?
Oh, I remember it.
Patchwork quilt flooring.
Yes. Yeah. And the seller just wanted too much money for it, and the amount of rehab we had to put into it, we just didn't think it was a good deal. During the due diligence of that property, a friend of ours brought us the property that we currently own. A friend of his was looking at it and didn't think it was going to go through. And he said, we might want to take a look at it. So
kind of a networking deal.
Yes.
Exactly.
So it really wasn't a realtor. It wasn't LoopNet. It wasn't any of the brokers that were.
Yes, it was off market, which, we'll take them off market if they come that way. We also, like what the brokers bring us to look at.
Oh, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good. So this property was off market. And how far is this property away from your house?
it's about an hour drive.
So it's a distance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a lot of family in Fort Worth. This property is maybe a mile from where my grandparents had their house near Camp Bowie and Ashland and Fort Worth. That's why we were looking in that area. Mm-hmm. And we had put in an offer on the other property. Unfortunately, the sellers thought it was worth more than what we did. And originally we were third in line, but we became first in line in that offer process because other people backed out, or maybe they didn't really exist. I don't know the whole story, but we weren't willing to budge on our price because we'd run the numbers and we knew what we could put into it, what it needed. We liked the property, but unfortunately those sellers still own that property and they're, I think, going to have to rehab it. They've refinanced it. Maybe it'll work out for them. I don't know. It's not really their business from what I understand. They bought that piece of property for a different reason. Right. And now I think since they haven't sold it, they're going to have to do what we were more than willing to do to that property. But, things happen, and we were in that area and people knew it, and it just was an opportunity that came along, and we jumped. As soon as we knew that it was available, we got to work on that.
So let's talk about West 7th here. So, Jennifer, why did you like the property?
It is in an adorable neighborhood. The houses are probably in the multi-hundred thousands in that area. It's on a main street, but a quiet street. It's that vintage kind of look.
What does that mean? It was built in 1962. 62. And somebody had gone in probably in the last, say, 10 years or so and put a brand new face in the property and really fixed it up and it really updated the property itself.
Yeah, it's in an area of Fort Worth, I call it Uptown Cowtown, kind of like Dallas. Dallas has had a resurgence over the years. Growing up in Dallas my whole life, I saw that area really kind of downtrodden. Yeah. And same thing I saw in Fort Worth going to my grandparents all through the 70s, 80s. This area of Fort Worth wasn't what it is now. Yeah. And it's had a resurgence. There are a lot of homes that are getting scraped and brand new homes getting built, just like areas of Dallas. And we saw the writing on the wall that this area was going to continue to grow. It's only a half a mile from the cultural museums of Fort Worth.
Yeah, it's big bucks.
Yeah.
So that area has gone through an unbelievable transition. It was a classic neighborhood, and now the property in that area is fantastic. I mean, I really do like that area. So you guys were kind of blessed to find something in and around that area, especially close to your relative's house too. You already knew that area. So Jennifer, how many units is this property?
It's 23 units. 23
units. Beggars can't be choosers, but was that a good step for you? Did you want to go for 150 doors or did you want to go for 10 doors? I mean, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, was that okay for you?
Yeah, that's where we wanted to start. We, like Doug had said, we kind of put our map together ahead of time. We wanted to start on the smaller side for the first one. So it totally fit the parameters.
The one in Dallas that fell through because the 1031 buyers out of California could pay cash for it and close in 10 days. Yeah. That was 44 units. So we were kind of looking in that size. Now this one in Fort Worth, price per door is more just because where it's located. It was already totally rehabbed. It has granite countertops, modern cabinetry, stained concrete floors, and bamboo flooring. It's really got a nice hip kind of a look, and it's close to the medical center over there in Fort Worth. So
a lot of millennials as tenants.
Yeah, and we didn't have a whole lot to do as far as rehab on this. We set aside some money for replacing the chiller tower and the boiler because it is an older property. It has a chiller and a boiler system. But as far as rehab, it didn't need a whole lot. Just need the rents pushed because the previous owners hadn't been doing that.
So why was the seller selling the property?
They own properties in Dallas, and this was the only one they had in Fort Worth. And I think they kind of own in Dallas in a similar type neighborhood. So they did one in Fort Worth, but I think having to get their manager to go over there and check on it weekly was getting to be a little bit more cumbersome. So they were ready to go ahead and sell.
How long did they own the property?
I think they owned it for about 7 years. I think they rehabbed it in 2009, 2010, something like that.
Jennifer, was it a stabilized property?
It was. Yeah. It was fully occupied. Maybe one unit was getting ready to be down, or it was in the transaction. A unit went down and got released right away for a good amount, though.
Yeah, and the tenants there seem to take good care of it. It doesn't need a whole lot at a turn. When we toured it, or actually when we went through due diligence and went through every unit, it looked like it was being well taken care of. So
let's
a little different demographic, I
let's
think.
walk through a little bit of the transaction itself. So you guys found the property. You guys made an offer on the property. It was accepted. Did you guys go back and forth a couple times with some different
No,
language
not really.
in the contract? Or?
That's the reason the first buyer that was trying to buy it wasn't getting anywhere. He was not offering what the seller was wanting. So they would not release financial information to that purchaser.
Yeah.
And that's when our friend said, you might want to talk to this owner because they're ready to sell, but they have an idea of a price in mind. Well, we already knew the area because we'd been working on that other deal that was
right
the
down the
value
street.
play. We already ran our numbers. We knew comps in the area, and we knew what we could get rents to. And this had already been rehabbed to the point of the way we would have done this other property, granite countertops, nice cabinetry, and so forth. So we scheduled a tour. We went, we met with their representative, and we went to a coffee shop, and within an hour we had an LOI submitted to them by email. And immediately we started getting all their financials. They knew that we meant business and that we were going to offer a price that they were happy with. And we knew that if we didn't offer a price close to what they were wanting, we'd be in the same situation. And, they just keep waiting for someone. And we thought the price was a good price. We'd already done our analysis in the area, and it turns out to be a really, really great price for that area.
So you start your due diligence on the property, and how long does that take, and who do you bring on, and what do they look at?
We brought on our property manager that we currently have. He brought in the subs. I mean, the property was coming out clean. The pipes were clean. The chiller tower, he thought could still get a couple more years out of it.
They'd been maintaining it well, but a property of that age is always going to have something come up. So we were advised by our manager, set aside some funds for contingencies.
Right.
Whether you need them now isn't the problem, but at some point while you own this, you will need to repair or replace some of these other items. So we found that putting that team together, as we've been advised, is a really good thing. And it helps us to take better care of the people's money that are investing with us because we're using experts that have seen this for 30 or 40 years. We feel like we've learned well, but we can always learn more. So we are deferring to those people with the knowledge.
Did you go back to the seller and ask for a retrade on the deal?
No, we were thinking, wow, this is easy. This is like smooth sailing. And then I remember being in the car and I get a phone call from you, Paul, and says, we need to talk.
Check your email.
All right, so let's back that little bit of the story up here. So you go under contract. We begin the third parties in the transaction, which means we have an appraisal, a phase one in the property, and kind of an engineer's report to kind of figure out what the health and safety is, if there's anything that's outstanding that needs to be taken care of. But let's talk a little bit about that phase one, and that's something that had come back. And every once in a while, we have a red flag that comes out on a phase one, and a phase one really determines whether there's any EPA issues on the property, any 55-gallon barrels of disposable oil that just are on the property. And we didn't have that, but what did we have, Jennifer?
There were some, what do they call,
Sanborn insurance maps. This is what companies used years and years ago, and I think they had maps from the 1920s that the underwriters for Freddie Mac had looked at, and they saw that on this property where this apartment was built in 1962, that there had previously been a gas station that was on the same property from 1926 to 1962. Unbeknownst, we think, to the seller, because they might have bought this property by cash and didn't finance it, where this kind of extensive phase one wasn't even done. I think they might have used a local bank. At least that was the story once we brought it to their attention that there was a gas station previously on the property. We were not going to be able to get financing with your help through these lenders until that question was answered.
So we checked all the boxes. I mean, you guys were perfect. The equity was there. The transaction made sense. The property was in good shape. Everything, the rent rolls were good. The occupancy was good. The NOI was there. But that one thing that popped up, just like what Doug's saying, is that this property that nobody knew had a gas station on it from 1920s to the 1960s, even before a lot of the maps were even drawn or put out there. And this is kind of a residential area because really nobody thought
it made no sense
that there would be a gas station. But by God, there was a gas station with that.
Apparently, in
property.
the 30s, the 1930s, there was a gas station on a lot of corners in residential areas, and they might have been just a small gas station or a mechanical shop. I didn't know that, but these maps are pretty fascinating, and I think the next property that we get involved with, we're going to get a copy of those maps at the beginning, so that we don't have this kind of a surprise, because it did create some problems. The seller started getting a little bit harder to deal with because
where
they
he was
deadlines.
Okay before.
Yeah.
Now you're telling him that he has a broken property or could have a broken property, and it could be a major problem for him because you guys also had $25,000 hard.
Yeah, well, it was going to go hard. We had a financing contingency deadline, and again, we can't prove this, but we think the seller was stalling so that money would go hard. And it's interesting because when we put the offer in on the property, the deadlines, started ticking off, and it really should have been the day after Thanksgiving that it was going to expire. But the day after Thanksgiving in Texas last year was a holiday. Mm-hmm. So all those numbers were actually like the next Monday, and they would not allow us to get the phase 2 going, which, is all handled through the lender that's going to be doing the deal. And they wouldn't let us kind of schedule a date, and they started being difficult. And I think it's because they thought that money was going hard, and they thought it had already gone hard on Friday. And I'm talking with them like Monday saying, we need to get our contract renegotiated to get some time in here because we're not going to buy this property, let $25,000 go hard and not have an answer to this question that our lender needs, because we're not going to get financing if there is a buried gas storage tank or if there's contaminated soil. So they did not extend the contract, so we actually did back out of it. We canceled it so that we wouldn't lose that hard money.
Right.
The interesting thing is now people knew.
Yeah.
You knew, brokers knew. They thought they could just sell this property to somebody for cash because I think in Texas, maybe you don't have to disclose things on commercial properties like you do residential, but there was no getting around this. The cat was out of the bag. And we were willing buyers. We liked the property. We wanted there not to be a problem with it, but there's no way we were going to purchase somebody else's problem. Mm-hmm. And Jennifer had a lot of discussions about that. And finally, the seller came to their senses, and they went back into contract. They allowed us to do what was required. And that was interesting. I'll let Jennifer tell that story about the day that the geologist came and the ground penetrating radar company and all that, because that was really interesting, this whole process.
Yeah, they ran the ground penetrating radar over the parking lots. He took 3 core samples. The geologist then, things were coming out good during that visit because he said sometimes you can smell it when they start pulling out the samples. But he was thinking it was looking good, bagged up all those samples, sent them down to Galveston or wherever they were going.
I think he went to North Carolina for quantitative analysis. He was from Galveston, I think. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, then we just had to wait on those results.
And wait. And that's where I think the seller got a little antsy too, because we were told how long it would take or the best estimate. And of course, things always take longer.
Yeah, another 2 weeks or 3 weeks past that period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but the good news is
we came out
everything
clean.
came back clean.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually was could have been a bad deal because that seller could have been forced to realize that there was a problem on his property with a gas well, gas tank, a dumping of petroleum products on that property that he'd have to deal with and mitigate through, whether to get clean soils that he'd have to go underneath and clean all that stuff out of the building.
Well, and we looked into that in the process before the phase 2 was done to find out, well, how much would it cost to remove a storage tank that was just buried and abandoned, or what if there's contaminated soil? And, it was into the hundreds of thousands of dollars or higher. Yeah. And that's why there's no way we're buying this until we have that answer and it's cleared, because we don't want to be, liable for anything, having to clean up a toxic site or something like that, which fortunately didn't turn out to be any kind of a problem like that. But
So it doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while it does. And I've dealt with phase twos, and I've had issues with phase twos that the land is hot, meaning that there is some chemical trace, whether it is a closed cleaning facility that uses products that leach into the soil, or it's an old gas station that's down the street, the water flows through, then there is problems. It doesn't happen very often, but just like Doug said, is that, just be aware if you can get information. If there was a phase one done on the property, if you can get during your due diligence, see if you can get a copy of that phase one and see if anything reports. We're still going to do another one, but that maybe helps you in negotiation up front if you knew it and if the seller knew it, just to prepare yourself. So we got over that. And now we're closing, and you guys did a Freddie Mac loan, and you guys had never bought a property yourselves. So the Freddie Mac loan was good because with third-party property management that you guys were going to have represent you, Freddie Mac was able to do a non-recourse 30-year amortization loan, a 10-year term. And you guys got a little bit of
4.45 and 3 years of interest only.
Interest only.
Yeah.
So that's not too bad
That's great.
out of the box.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah.
No problem. So how's the property doing now? I mean, where have you guys taken the rents from, and where are they at right now?
It's doing great. There are some leases that we're trying to get. They were going month to month before we bought the property. So we are talking to those tenants and seeing if they're wanting to stay, because we are raising the rents, but we're trying to do it in increments that we don't run out the tenants.
Our management company, they said, we don't want to scare people off. They like living here, but if we raise the rents to the point where they need to be all at once, you might have an exodus. And we already had, out of 23 units, I think we had 11 or 13 that were on month to month. So they are talking to those tenants each month. They'll do 2 or 3 and say, here's where your rent is, and you haven't, had your rent raised in 2 years. Here's where rents are in the area. We're going to raise you to this point, which is about half of what it could bear. And there's also some rubs that are being done to help get some utility reimbursement that was being done by the previous owners, but not to the extent that it needed to be. So people are renewing leases at a higher rate, but not where we're actually going for, but we're doing a little bit. And I think it's allowing our management to take the rents so they don't all expire at the same time.
Right.
And, somebody might get a 6-month term here, and then they'll renew to the full amount of the rent increase in 6 months. Somebody else might get 8 months or 9 months, at a certain rate.
Does your manager live on property?
No, but he lives in the area and he manages other properties in that submarket, and that's why we chose him, because he had a high knowledge of the area. We didn't want to just go with a management company that manages apartments that doesn't know that specific niche, and he knows it, and he's got good employees with him. I think partners actually that kind of take it on themselves to really do the best they can do for the investors in that area that own smaller properties. Now, I guess he can take larger ones on too, but he came highly recommended by people that we trust.
That's good. How much time, Jennifer, are you at that property?
Honestly, not very much. He handles everything. We like to go over there. We just recently had an investor meeting, which was fun. So we spent some time over there. But like Doug said, his family's there. So when we go to see them, we do drive by the property. At the beginning, laundry contract whoever had the laundry facility before, that contract had expired before it got sold. So we were putting in the washer and dryers. So we were over there for that to make sure that all went well. Just some other landscaping things that we've gone over for, really not too much. So we get weekly updates from our property manager. They're very thorough. We're probably on the phone with them just every third day.
Last night, we were on the phone with them about 2 to 3 times a month. That's what we're going over to check on it.
And how many, you guys did a small syndication on this transaction. How many investors do you have?
There's 14 of us. So, yeah.
Okay. And do you guys send out monthly, quarterly reports on how the property is doing?
We send out monthly
reports. Yeah, we get weekly reports from the manager about traffic, how many they've shown, how many are on notice. Like recently, since it's close to the medical school, I think one of the tenants had finished and now they're going off to do a residency, so they're moving out. But it's a 60-day notice, so that gives management time to, locate new tenants.
Oh, so
right now, we are 100%.
Tenants need 60 days to cancel their lease after it
that's
expires. Wow.
But that's one thing right now that they were saying is they've got people that want to move in, and there's some people that want to move right now, but there's not a vacant unit to move into. And then other people might be looking early, and they want a place to move maybe in August. Well, we can tell them, but we can't necessarily show them anything like that because we are 100% occupied.
Yeah.
So,
but you guys don't have a little model?
No, not on a 23-unit property. We can't really afford to have something like that. We've got great pictures. We got a website that shows pictures of the interior and the exterior that work out well.
That's great.
But it is an excellent street. We didn't really go into a whole lot of detail, but there's a lot of traffic. It's a main road coming out of downtown Fort Worth. It's really well known. And a matter of fact, at one of your events, I think a couple of months ago, out in Grapevine, after we had purchased it, brokers knew that we had purchased it. We got it off market, and they were very complimentary, saying, man, we've been trying to get that seller to list that property for a couple of years, and I can't believe you got that. That's a one-of-a-kind property. That's just an irreplaceable asset, and made us feel good. We felt that way already, but to hear that from people in the profession, that we really scored a great home run kind of with the property. And, the fact that we got a long-term loan on it, 10 years from now, who knows? That area is just going gangbusters right now.
Yeah, it's a great area. Beautiful tall trees around that area, aged properties. A lot of the millennials want to live down and work in that area.
Oh, when we leave the property and we drive east back toward downtown and just go in and go past all the hot spots, the nightlife. They've got a lot of Class A office space. They've got retail. They've got entertainment with high-class restaurants.
Yeah, it's a great area. Yeah. Whether it's a single family or a multifamily, any funny stories about owning real estate?
Okay, I'll go first. One of the single families that we have, I didn't go with you to look at it, and he came home and he's like, "Can you smell me?" Because he had gone into the house to look at it, and it had probably 9 cats. And,
I think it counted 14.
Oh my!
And actually, when the door opened and we went in to tour it, you know what a dry heave is?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was me. I had to step back out, but anyway. We purchased that house and took our daughters there to experience that in the condition it was in, because we want them to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how that can be very profitable. And that home has turned out to be a great asset that we own. It makes great cash flow, and it's already improved a huge amount just since we've owned it in 2014 when we purchased it. But the house is beautiful now, but it was a disaster because this woman, she was a nurse actually, and she had 14 cats living in that house, free reign.
And some dogs.
Yeah, there was one dog. It was an outside dog, but oh my gosh.
But that's the funny house, because now the tenant that's in there, he had injured his back or something like that, and he had asked Doug, "Can I replace the upstairs tub with a soaker tub?" And Doug's like, "I'm not paying for that.
We just rehabbed the house
it's a brand new tile, brand new tub, everything." And so Doug went into work to go check on a water heater issue, and he went into it's a conversion garage, and he went into the garage, and the guy has a tub on a platform, and he heats it with a propane
camp heater.
So
this is on your property?
In our property. So we're going to have to address that one.
But it was really strange because it's a nice soaker tub. I mean, it's probably several hundred or
close to $1,000. Yeah.
And
easy.
He's built this platform out of plywood and fence posts so it raises up. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And then I took pictures of it because I'm going to have to talk to him about it.
Wow.
This is just last week that I discovered it. So
crazy,
kind of interesting. And that house also, it's not a funny story, but our first tenants who were in there on the day after Christmas, 2015, there was a tornado. You might have heard about it. Ran through Dallas, 200 steps away from the back door of this house.
Oh my gosh.
Total destruction. That's how close we were to having our tenants harmed and the house destroyed. Now, it did destroy the fence and, the roof and so forth. But that's all been taken care of with insurance. But I mean, that's not a funny one, but it's
still on
Texas.
that same house.
Yeah, that same house. So
Let's jump back into multifamily itself. Now, you guys have a smaller property. Are you guys on the hunt to find a larger property? And how's that hunt been?
We are on the hunt. We are looking. We've even expanded our circle a little bit, probably to about a 3-hour drive from our house. Just this past weekend, we were in the College Station area looking at a property. Doug and I made a drive up north and looked at some properties.
We put a lot of miles on the car this week.
Yeah. I mean, we would love to have something in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but it is getting harder to find the kind of properties that can get a good return. So we're thinking, well, we're going to expand the circle. And we don't mind, since Doug has scaled back to 3 days a week, we can take those long weekends and just go hunting.
The type of dentistry I do, it's keeping people healthy, but sometimes people come in and they are in extremely bad shape. And I love taking that person and getting them back to optimal health. And we'd love to do the same thing with an apartment. I do it with old cars, love to restore things. So a value type deal is something we'd really like to do, but we have to be able to purchase that at a value price.
Right.
And it seems like this market, it's harder and harder to find that. That's why we backed out of we didn't back out of it. The seller wouldn't accept our offer in Fort Worth on that first property. But they still own it. So that tells us something that, there's got to be some resistance at some point where the price just doesn't make sense.
Right.
If you know what you're doing and you've been trained well and you've been mentored well, you can figure out if that's a good purchase or not. And, we don't mind waiting a little bit longer to find the right property. We want to take good care of our investors and make sure that they get good returns and they don't worry about things. So, but we're willing to expand our circle, and that's what we're doing now.
That's great. We talked a little bit about legacy assets. You think the girls would think about getting into the multifamily business? Is that something that's possibly on their radar?
I do think that. Our older one, she's away working, but she has thought about rental houses. The funny one is the mother of our daughter's best friend called me recently and asked me about, what, you guys are in rental properties. So I know in a way she's talking over at their house about it. So even though people have said, spoon feed it to the kids, because if you overwhelm them, they just don't want anything to do with it.
Sure.
But I definitely see that they see us not working as much as, like Doug in his office, and actually enjoying the time together and doing this and the rewards that are coming out of it. And
yeah, she does share things with her friends, which, makes us feel good. But this has given Jennifer and I something to do together. My dental practice, she spent years, doing things to help manage that practice.
Sure.
But now we can do something together, because as I get older, I've been doing dentistry it'll be 30 years this coming year. I can't do that forever. And the fact that I got hurt as bad as I did really opened our eyes to the fact that business only runs if I'm healthy and working. So this has given Jennifer and I something to work on together that we are excited about. We both can spend a lot of time cultivating the relationships that are necessary, not only with our team, but with, the passive investors that are interested in doing deals with us. And we spend a lot of time together. We bounce things off of each other. And it's given us a new avenue to explore together. And both of our kids, one's out of college and one will be out soon. So I think this has been a real good step for us to take together.
Any advice to anybody that is wanting to get into the multifamily business? Like, you guys look back, say 2-3 years, any advice that you would give somebody coming in?
I'm going to answer that.
Yeah.
What, are you thinking what I'm thinking?
What you're thinking.
We were making up our business cards and we're like, well, what do you want to call yourself? And so we came up with the name Geronimo, and it kind of symbolizes that, you got to jump. You can't just keep waiting on the sideline, can't hang on to the plane. The part that goes with that is that you got to make sure your parachute's packed and everything's in place, and then take that jump, because we could just keep being that, a B-type personality and over-analyzing everything.
Which is natural for a dentist to do, to really analyze and get everything in order, and then you finally act. But we've met a lot of people in our investor group who are like that. They're afraid to take that step. we were kind of forced to take that step because of
The accident.
yeah. But we have not looked back, and it's really turned out well for us. We encourage people that we're meeting when they're kind of timid like that to say, get your education, keep coming to all these meetings, meet as many people, go on the internet to the hub, and, not just the things that we learn in our investor group, but explore the internet, read, research things. And then you're prepared and you're ready to jump, because if a plane's going to go down, you don't want to be on that plane.
Yeah.
And the plane, when I got hurt, it could have been down permanently.
Yeah.
We found a way to jump, and we're floating down nice and calm. And
I love it. I love all these analogies. So talking about Geronimo, what's the best way to get in contact with you, Doug, or Jennifer? What's an email address that if somebody wanted to build a relationship with you, what would be the best way?
Okay, our email address is geronimoproperty@gmail.com.
So let me write that down, geronimoproperty@gmail.com. That's perfect. Doug and Jennifer, boy, I appreciate your business. We appreciate learning more about what you guys have done. We're looking forward to seeing what the future lies and building a legacy for your family and doing it together as a team, a husband-wife team, to spend more time together and kind of solidify a great relationship. So we appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate your help with everything that you've been involved with, helping us get to this point, and look forward to moving to that next larger property and this challenges ahead for us.
You'll do it. I'm very confident that just to keep kissing some more frogs. A princess or a prince will jump out of there. No worries.
Yes. Thank you so much, Paul.
No problem. We appreciate it, Jennifer and Doug Joplin. We appreciate you being in the podcast. Again, if anybody wants to get our 15-page white paper report on structuring, financing, multifamily 101 white paper report, make sure you go to the Old Capital Podcast website and sign up for that. Get that. And also to Michael Becker's due diligence report about what he uses when he goes out and finds a property, kind of a checklist. You want to have that too in your possession. So again, the Joplings, thanks for being with us. I'm Paul Peebles. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.